Hello and welcome to Sketchplanations the Podcast, fortnightly forays into facts, frameworks and phenomena as found within the deep archive of explanatory sketches at sketchplanations.com. I'm engineer and broadcaster Rob Bell, and joining me once again is designer and creator of Sketchplanations, Jono Hey, and entrepreneur and past winner of The Apprentice, Tom Pellereau. All right, lads.
Hello. That's very impressive how your diction is so clear, Robert.
Focus, Tommy, focus. Which is good because this time we're talking about accuracy and precision and the fact that they're not the same thing. So in your little write-up under the sketch for this one, Jono, you make the point that some things are much more easily explained in a sketch than with words. So, Jono, do you want to start by explaining what the sketch shows? And then listeners, please do refer to the sketch as we talk about it. You can see it as the artwork for this episode, and I'll include a link to see it at sketchplanations.com as well. Jono, how does the sketch show the difference between accuracy and precision?
I think it shows it quite well.
I agree.
This sketch is essentially, and I'm not the first person to come up with this, but it's essentially 4 targets, like the sort of targets you might have in archery practice.
Yep.
Ones that sat on the ground 20 meters away. There's 4 of them. And they're basically showing each of the different situations between whether you're accurate and whether you're precise. So if I start on the left-hand side, you've got a situation where you're shooting at the target and you're kind of all over the map. You're not hitting the center and you know, one is in the bottom left and one is in the top right.
Some haven't even hit the target.
Some haven't, yeah, you're right. Yeah, some of them are, you know, in the back. There you're not accurate, nor are you precise. The next one over is one which is a situation which is accurate, but is not precise. And in this case, you've been shooting at the target and basically all of the shots are clustered around the middle, but they're not all hitting the middle. Your average location of your arrows are basically on the center.
But there's quite a bit of distance between each of the hits, right?
Right. There's a bit of spread around each of them, yeah. So every time you do it, you're slightly different, but you're basically hitting towards the center.
Accurate towards the middle, but not very precise with where all those arrows are going.
Exactly. And so the next one is a situation where you can see that there's a bunch of shots and they are all clustered really precisely, but they are in fact not on the center of the target.
I'd be quite proud of that one.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, because actually precision is very difficult for us to do. So this is a situation where you were very precise. You were basically doing exactly the same thing every time.
Hitting the same bit at the target every time.
Yeah. But you were miscalibrated and you weren't actually managing to aim towards the center. But, so in that case, you weren't accurate, but you were precise. And then the last one is, boom, you hit the center and you basically hit the center every time.
Olympic gold medal won.
Atomic clock.
Atomic clock. Lovely. Yeah. Lovely.
Exactly. If you hit the center and then every shot hits exactly in the center, then you're accurate and precise. I learned about this distinction from a book by Simon Winchester called Exactly, which was all about accuracy and precision and actually how improvements in these kind of led to the modern world and how we make products and the Industrial Revolution. And he had this nice way of saying it, which was accuracy is true to intention and precision is true to itself. So every time, if you're being precise, every time you do it, you're getting exactly the same result. But accuracy, you might not be getting the same result every time, but your intent is spot on.
That's clear.
It can be a bit hard to get your head round, and I can give a bit more context. But anyway, that's the idea with the picture, with these 4 different targets, if you can imagine them, and there's 4 different scenarios of accurate and precise.
So, for example, my dad throwing the ball at the wall above the window. Would you say that it was his precision that let him down?
Right. So he was in the garden and he chucked the ball at the house, aiming for the brick on the house.
The brick just above the glass window.
So as not to throw the ball straight through the glass.
He can do that, and he did that, but he did it again.
Yeah.
And he got a different result, and it went straight through the window.
I would say, Tommy, with all respect to your dad, that is neither accurate nor precise. Because his intention was to hit the brick above the wall, which he did once, but then he didn't do that the second time. So there's no accuracy. And But for it to be precise, it would have to hit the same place or very near the same place, which he didn't do either.
Okay.
So, John, do you concur on that?
I mean, I think there's a chance
instance,
that if he was to repeatedly chuck the ball at a house and most of the time hit the brick just above the window, then he could be accurate. But in this case...
Yeah, he backed both his accuracy and his precision, and unfortunately he didn't have either.
Problem with the intention as well. Yeah.
The outcome was really unfortunate.
Well, for him, it was very funny for me.
So I think, Jono, in science and engineering, is that where Simon Winchester talks about in his book exactly? Is he mainly applying it to science and engineering? And
well, shall I give you a little bit more of the context? Because it does bear on it.
Yeah, go on.
So the full book title of the book is exactly How Precision Engineers Created the Modern World. And I think a good example, if I think about it, is imagine you're a shoemaker a long time ago, and you had a shoe shop and you were good at making shoes and you made shoes by hand. And perhaps you got really good at your craft and you managed to make shoes which were just right for the customer. But then so every now and then somebody comes in and you make a shoe and you don't get it quite right, but sometimes you do. Or then imagine you get somebody else in your shop who's training up and they come and get a shoe. And so from the customer, the shoe that they come out will be very different because it's made by a different person and to different standards and slightly different ways. Everything was done with crafts, and crafts depends very much on the person. And then what happened around the Industrial Revolution, so in the 1800s, in particular, like he talks about this chap called Henry Maudsley, and he, together with, building on a number of other inventions, basically he made something called the screw cutting lathe, which you can go see in the Science Museum, the original one. And what that enabled him to do,
the Science Museum in London,
yeah, sorry. And so was to make screw threads precisely, basically exactly the same every time. And so before that, you had screws that were cut by hand from iron, which sounds kind of mad. Obviously, they had tools that they were doing it, but they were basically, somebody's pushing this thing and you're trying to cut these screw threads. And so everyone is slightly different. Yeah. And so you build your machine, but if you built another machine out of these same components, they're all going to be slightly different. And what the sort of innovation he had there was when you were able to produce things which were exactly the same every time. So very, very precise. So not just like a master craftsman gets it right most of the time, but they were precise every time. It led to being able to do interchangeable parts. Mm-hmm. You can have these set of screws, you can have nuts, you can have bolts and all this stuff. And when all of these are interchangeable, that was essentially the foundation for things like mass production, because I can make these here and they can work in your machine over there.
Yeah.
And before that, when everybody's making things by hand and there's all these variations, that wasn't possible. Yeah. And he actually invented also, I don't know if you remember using it, when you're doing engineering, but there's a thing called a micrometer, which is a very small gauge. You hold it in your hand a bit like a wrench and you turn this little screw thread and it, squeezes something and tells you how wide it is. And then there's like a secondary screw thread, which is incredibly precise, and he invented that 200 years ago and was able to show to incredible degrees of accuracy that had never been possible before, that all these things were the same and really precise. And so these inventions in precision, being able to do the same thing exactly again and again, were really critical in being able to make products as we know them out of metal that you could, reproduce at scale.
We live in an incredible precision world, and I don't think many of us really realize it at all.
No, you're right. And when we talk about that, and when we talk about that, the history of it, Jono, as you did there, I think it makes you realize that everything now is expected to be precise and accurate.
Well, certainly of the products we use, and if you're buying parts for a phone that you're making, you expect it to come exactly as spec, and you can do things at incredible tolerances and things now.
Yeah.
I was thinking as an example though, which I think is different. Obviously, he was talking about engineering and making products. An example I was trying to think of, which is perhaps easier to understand, would be like food. So if I was to say my accurate meal would be one that was delicious, exactly, this is a great meal. If I went to like the local sandwich shop, the quality is probably all over the map. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Most of the time it's not great. There was a little local Italian near where we worked where every now and then I had some of the best pasta I've almost ever had. And most of the time it was good, but every now and then it was brilliant. And I feel like their intention was like they knew how to make good pasta, but they just didn't do it every time. But sometimes they did, and it was amazing. Now, if you go to the not accurate but precise, would be something like McDonald's, right? So like it is not going to be the best meal you ever had, but if you buy McDonald's wherever, it's basically going to be exactly the same as wherever else you got it. So they're incredible experts at precision. And I think it's only at like, the really top restaurants where you're basically guaranteed an amazing meal every time because there's all that attention to precision.
Yes.
But it's a different field. But like food is different. I was thinking if I'm making a curry or something and I've got whatever's in the fridge, it's going to be different every time. Sometimes it's brilliant, sometimes it's not.
What I've really enjoyed about this is thinking outside the box away from science and engineering, Jono, as well. And with food as well, is there something about if you follow a recipe exactly, you're being very precise because you could do that again. It's 300 grams of this. It's 100 milliliters of that. So you're just doing that. You can be really precise with that over and again. The intention is for it to be a really tasty meal. And so let's say it came down to the amount of salt and pepper and seasoning, and the recipe told you to exactly this much and exactly that much precision. Actually, if you were just to season it to taste, that gives you where you want to be, right? True. But you might not be able to repeat that consistently every single time, but it's moving more towards the accuracy. Is there something there as well? Because I've enjoyed really thinking about it in these kinds of terms around the repeatability, the consistency versus how close you are to the intent of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, they're always like subtle variations, aren't they? So that, I think precision is given the same circumstances, you end up with the same output. Yeah. And I was thinking like a recipe is a set of instructions to get close to a great meal, but like it's still going to be different because your ingredients are going to be different. Like your onion is going to be slightly bigger, or your tomatoes are going to be in season,
slightly juicier,
or not in season, or exactly. You're missing this bit from your fridge. And so I sometimes think even though you might follow a recipe, I cook this bit at a slightly higher heat than before for 10 minutes instead of 8 minutes, it's going to be different. And so unless you get really precise, which is exactly the sort of thing that someone like McDonald's is amazing at, it is still going to be different. And so as you say, like you're going to season it and it's probably going to come out good seasoned to taste, but it is different. You're responding to a different situation. It's like somebody moved the target each time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. You're adapting to the conditions.
Another example that I quite liked within kind of sciencey engineering stuff is like calibration of tools. And a great easy example that I think a lot of people will have done is calibration of, say, weighing scales. So you could have very precise weighing scales, but they could be consistently out by 200 grams each time. So they're precise because they're every time it weighs exactly what it is, but it's 200 grams out.
Yeah.
Now, so your accuracy is out, but your precision is high. But you can calibrate that tool to make it accurate again, right? You calibrate your weighing scales to bring it down. But if you've got shoddy weighing scales where you've got a load of imprecision in there as well, so you're not even getting consistent things, you can't calibrate that back in to be accurate as well. You might have accuracy-ish, but your imprecision is all over the shop.
I think scales are a great example. We got some scales and they just sort of wobble about. You can't rely on them at small amounts.
I saw a little thing on that saying, and this comes back to the targets and the arrows or darts, whatever, in your sketch, Jono. Calibration can fix your aim, but it doesn't steady your hand when you're firing the darts or throwing the darts. Tommy?
Yeah, so obviously my work relies on creating designs for unique products and then repeating those over and over again. Most of my products, we sell 10, 20, 100, 200,000 pieces of them. And the consumer is expecting that every single one is the same. So I'm so fortunate in the fact that it is now possible, because of all these amazing people in the past who've developed things, that I can make products that are identical. So, for example, my LED face masks, which have been hugely popular, they are completely reliant on having exactly the right wavelength in the LED light that's coming out. The LEDs that are actually inside all the masks, now they are one of the few things which they make thousands of those, and then there's a machine that moves so fast which tests the wavelength of every single one, and then underneath it has pots of, depending on how precise or how near to the wavelength we want it is. And if it's within like ±2, it goes in this pot, ±10, this pot, etc., because it is still an incredibly difficult art to make all the LEDs identical to, we're talking to 1,000th of a nanometer in terms of what their output is, which is incredible precision. But even within that precision, we have to choose a small subset of that.
Because you have tolerances. Right.
Yeah.
And anything outside of the tolerances that you've deemed acceptable doesn't get used.
Exactly. Or doesn't get used by my product, might get used by a cheaper one, or might get used for something else.
So the size of your tolerance is talking about your precision, right?
Yes. And the amazing thing is that the huge body of evidence has shown that 633, which is the wavelength of the red that's used in virtually all masks, is really important. And if it's 630, it's not as good. So my business is hugely dependent on precision and accuracy, and my customers depend on that.
Can I give another sort of business example, but not quite so physical?
Why, please do.
And we spent a huge amount of time at the companies I've worked at on the interview process and recruitment generally. One way to think of your interview process is, do you get good people at the end? Do you get the people that you want at your company who thrive and do well? And then every time you run your interview process, is it essentially doing the same thing so that you are going to find those people at the end who are going to do well in your company? And so, like, if you're recruiting over and over again over the years, how good is your recruitment process at finding the right people for your company? This is your accuracy. And then how reliable is it? Like, if you run it every time, if somebody else is involved in the process, if it's a slightly different department, let's say, are you still going to find that if you run it this year versus next year? And I think those are quite interesting when you just think of processes generally. Are you getting what you intend? And do you keep getting what you intend every time you run it?
That's good.
And so I think if you think about it in that sort of way, a lot of things can be related to sort of this idea of accuracy and precision. I think, a very classic one, and that there's a related sketch, very similar drawing, but like these two ideas of reliability and validity, which I came across in the education school. And a classic one there is, if you do an IQ test, are you actually testing someone's intelligence? And then if you were to do multiple IQ tests, would you get the same IQ at the end of it? Would you get the same result? They're called reliability and validity in those examples. Are you measuring what you intended to measure? And if you, given all the circumstances the same, somebody's doing this again, will they get the same result? And actually, so often in a lot of social processes, we get different things. And obviously, where I learned about accuracy and precision here was about engineering. We essentially resolved that and can now make things that are both accurate and very precise. But in a lot of these sort of social contexts, we really struggle both with the accuracy and with the precision. Like, it's not always clear that your interview process is going to get the right people in, nor is it clear that every time you do it, you're going to get the same people coming out the other end. Interesting concepts to think about.
I think the non-physical examples get quite interesting in this, Jono. So I just watched the Oscar-winning documentary called Mr. Nobody versus Putin.
Okay.
And it's about a school teacher who just filmed everything basically within the school in Russia. And what I wanted to talk about, where I think this applies, is that there's one teacher in there who, it feels to me like he grew up during the Soviet period. And so he has been indoctrinated with kind of Soviet mantra. And when the war in Ukraine started, Putin enforced on schools across Russia that those kind of Soviet mantras come back, and teachers were forced, they had scripts to read to their pupils. The pupils had scripts that they had to respond back to. So it was all very doctrinated, if you like. And there was this one teacher who was just really in that mindset. And so I was thinking about, one can be very consistent in their beliefs or something on what they believe to be correct. And who am I to judge this? But you watch it and you feel, well, that is, you've just been indoctrinated to say all this stuff. So you can be consistent in what your beliefs are, but in actual fact, you're wrong. And that could be factually wrong, but because of whatever you've been taught or whatever you've been told, you are consistent about your beliefs in it, but your accuracy, so your precision is high, but your accuracy is shot because it's wrong. It could be factually wrong.
I mean, education is a really interesting space for this. You know, put people through a course. You've got different teachers. Do they all learn the same thing? And as you end up, if you try and increase the precision around it, like how repeatable it is, then you end up sort of teaching to the test, or everybody's learning exactly the same material, which may or may not be right for that set of students you've got in front of you. I think you want the creativity of the teacher to be able to adapt to the students in front of you, but the more you try and standardize it, more precise and repeatable you make it, who knows if you're getting the right outcomes at the end of it. Yeah.
Once you start to dig into this, it gets quite interesting. It's an interesting thought exercise, I thought, to apply this into lots of different areas.
Yeah.
Another one I thought about is, and I've had this recently about buying a house and about gut feelings. So you can have a really strong gut feeling about something. And by definition, I think that would be accurate. Your gut feeling is an accurate representation of what you're feeling, but it's not necessarily precise because you might find it difficult to explain the detail of what you're feeling, but you know if it's accurate because I'm feeling this in my gut. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I think it goes quite to the, almost like the McDonald's example. But like, there was another sketch which has come up before, which was this idea from Roger Martin called the knowledge funnel. And he has this thing that things, particularly he's talking about business, but go from being a mystery to being a heuristic to being an algorithm. And so the mystery is like, we don't know why this happens, but sometimes we get it right. And then heuristic is like, okay, we've got some rules. Let's say that we're going to follow roughly these rules and it gets a bit more reliable. And only like in food do people like McDonald's get it down to an algorithm. But at the beginning, you might have that intuition and you're like, I think it's this, but I couldn't say why it's this.
Yes. Yeah.
And the job there, if it's a business and you're trying to give people a great experience every time or make the product the same every time, is to figure out what it is and turn it into something that's repeatable.
And precise. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is an interesting challenge.
There's potentially an interesting aspect also of culture too, in the fact that, for example, bread making used to be kind of very inaccurate, very imprecise, say. And then during our sort of younger years, certainly, and it's still today, if you want an identical loaf of bread, you can go into any shop and get the exact same Kingsmill, for example, in the UK, right? But we're kind of culturally kind of going more towards but I quite like going to the bakery on a Saturday and getting an artisan loaf from, one of the many bakeries now. Then you kind of end up spending like almost a tenner on a loaf of bread, whereas you could go and get one that is absolutely perfect from the Co-op or the Tesco's around the corner for sort of £1.10. We've become so precise in some areas that I think potentially culturally we're almost like, but I don't want that precision anymore. I like it when it's a bit random.
That's a nice observation, Tommy. So kind of harking back to what Jono was talking about early and the Industrial Revolution bringing in mechanization of processes in order to have accuracy and precision. There's now a real demand to go back to the crafts.
Yeah, and you're seeing that in beer and food. And a part of me feels like people having long beards is kind of a harking back to that. Because when you have a beard, it's a bit more unpredictable, a bit more that, when everyone's clean shaven, it's sort of a bit more precise, so to speak, maybe.
I love it.
Culturally, we go around in circles, maybe.
Well, you did know that there is a sketch called The Beard Cycle.
Nice.
Which is quite ridiculous, but it was more about fashion as much as anything.
It plays out though in society, Jono. Go on, explain the beard cycle. You've mentioned it.
No, only that, after a while, if everybody's got beards, somebody who's clean shaven
is
it
unique
looks
and
different and interesting.
Yeah.
And then if everybody's clean shaven, the guys with the big beards are more interesting and different.
Yeah.
I was thinking about your craft loaves, Tom. I think it's quite interesting. Like fruit and vegetables is an interesting one because obviously, nature's a bit different every time, but you can definitely walk into some supermarkets now and, the carrots are all like within 1 or 2 centimeters and they're all straight and they're all exactly the same color. And, in a way, the joy of a
knobbly
farmer's
gnarly
market or something. Yeah, it's like everything's a bit different, and it looks a bit sort of weird and suspicious that all the apples are exactly the same size and color and without blemish and everything like that. And we don't necessarily like it every time, actually. It feels weird. It is weird.
Isn't it funny, though, how now society has deemed it acceptable for us to pay more?
Yeah. Isn't that clever?
Yeah, isn't that clever?
You could sell some products, Tom, that are slightly different wavelengths.
Yeah.
Don't quite fit.
It's a bit weird.
Charge a bit more for them.
What else would anyone like to add to the precision and accuracy discussion before we round off? I'll go with one. What would you rather have? A doctor who's precise or accurate? Or a surgeon who's precise or accurate?
Depends what they're doing.
Yeah. Most of the time, you want both. The book says it's accurate and precision is what you need. And that is the
that's
innovation.
Almost the epitome of needing accuracy and precision, isn't it?
Surgery is an interesting example. Like you'd have an amazing surgeon who could maybe do amazing with poor tools. And be like, how do you make it so that everybody gets the right surgery and done to a high standard every time? It's difficult. You have to be accurate and precise.
Yeah. What about a car?
Yeah, you probably want accurate and precise. Yeah. I wrote in the sketch like true to intention and true to itself, which I find it intriguing, but it's sometimes a bit hard to get my head around. Another way to think about it, which I quite like, is accuracy is kind of like doing the right thing, and precision is doing it right.
And robots, and I've seen this, can be incredibly precise at repeatedly doing the same thing, but it can be way off accurate.
Yeah.
Hilariously.
AI, I think, is probably, I get bored of talking about AI, but I think it's important that we bring it up because it's always here. I feel like AI could be similar to that, Tommy, where, I don't know, is it precise? Because
I think it can be pretty good at both.
Well, I actually think one of the intriguing things about AI is that it's not always precise. You can ask the same question and get different answers, which is kind of fascinating because we're not used to
computers giving different,
doing that at all. You expect that a computer is going to give you, you put in ones and zeros in one end, it's going to come exactly the same. And our electronics and our software has been like that since day dot. And so it's so strange, isn't it, that you can say, tell me again, and it will give you something different.
But it could also not be accurate as
we know.
As we know. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting.
To give a really topical example, I was thinking of if you're shooting missiles, like one of them is actually aiming towards the right target and the other one is hitting the target where you're intending. And there was, a case recently where they hit the spot where they were aiming extremely precisely, but it wasn't the right place to be targeting in the first place.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's a very literal, accurate, and precision examples, but we've got extremely precise with the weapon. But you still need to do things accurately.
Yeah, good. Well, listen, I make that precisely the time that we should stop, but whether that's accurate or not is anyone's guess. Go well, stay well. Goodbye. Till next time.
See ya.
Thank you.
All music on this podcast series is provided by the very talented Frank Cinelli, and you can find many more tracks at frankcinelli.com.